When you watch a disturbing death scene in a movie, there's comfort in knowing it's fiction. But what if it wasn't? What if someone actually died that way? Some filmmakers don't create horror, they recreate it. They take real murders, real suffering, and put them on screen for millions to watch. In this video, we're uncovering 5 movie deaths that crossed the line from imagination into reality. The victims were real, the terror was real, and now their final moments live forever on film. It was July 25, 1941 in Chicago, Illinois. Mamie Till gave birth to her only child, Emmett Louis Till. Everyone called him Bobo or Bo. He was a cheerful, confident kid who loved to make people laugh. Mamie raised him mostly alone after leaving his father when Emmett was just 1 year old. They lived on Chicago's South Side in a tight-knit black community where everyone looked out for each other. At 6 years old, Emmett survived polio, but it left him with a stutter. His mother taught him a trick: whistle softly before saying difficult words, especially those starting with B. He did this all the time, even when buying his favorite candy, bubblegum. Despite his young age, Emmett was remarkably responsible. While Mamie worked long hours as a clerk for the United States Air Force, he took care of everything at home. He cooked, cleaned, and did laundry, telling his mother that if she earned the money, he'd handle the rest. At McCosh Grammar School, Emmett was popular. He played baseball and dreamed of going professional. He also talked about becoming a motorcycle police officer. By 14, he was independent, stylish, and full of life. In summer 1955, Emmett's great-uncle Mose Wright visited from Money, Mississippi. Emmett begged to go back with him. Mamie was terrified. She knew how dangerous the South was for black people, but she finally said yes. On August 19th, she gave him his late father's silver ring, engraved with the initials LT, and a date from 1943. On August 20th, she watched him board the train. She never saw him again. Emmett arrived in Money on August 21st. It was tiny, just a few buildings. He stayed with Mose Wright, picked cotton, and spent time with cousins. On August 24th, Emmett and several relatives went to Bryant's grocery and meat market. He went inside for bubble gum. As he left, he whistled, just his usual habit. Carolyn Bryant accused him of inappropriate behavior, though decades later she admitted she lied. Witnesses saw nothing wrong, but the boys knew trouble was coming and ran. On August 28th, between 2 a.m. and 3:30 a.m., Carolyn's husband, Roy Bryant, and his half-brother, J.W. Milam, showed up at Mose Wright's home with a weapon. They dragged Emmett into a truck. Wright begged them to stop, saying he was just a child from the North. They threatened Wright into silence. Emmett was taken away. What happened next came out in later testimony and confessions. Emmett was taken to a barn and badly beaten. Then they drove him to the Tallahatchie River. He was forced to carry a 75-pound cotton gin fan. He was shot, restrained, and his body was later disposed of in the water. On August 31st, 2 boys found his body. It was almost unrecognizable, but the ring identified him. Mamie demanded his return and insisted on an open casket funeral at Robert's Temple Church of God in Christ. Tens of thousands came. Jet magazine published photos that shocked the country. Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam were tried in September 1955. An all-white jury cleared them in just 67 minutes. In January 1956, they confessed everything to Look magazine after being paid $4,000. They showed no remorse. Emmett's case inspired films and documentaries, including The Murder of Emmett Till from 2003 and Till from 2022, which depicted scenes based on what happened to him. His story became fuel for the civil rights movement. Rosa Parks later said she thought of Emmett when she refused to give up her seat. Mamie Till Mobley spent the rest of her life speaking about her son. His story led to real change. The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act became law in 2022, and a national monument was established in 2023. Emmett Till was 14 years old. He went to visit family, bought some candy, and never came home. His name is now permanently written into history, remembered through the courage of those who refused to let his story be forgotten. It was September 27, 1969, at Lake Berryessa in Northern California. Bryan Hartnell, a 20-year-old college student, and Cecelia Shepard, a 22-year-old music student, were both enrolled at Pacific Union College. On this warm afternoon, they drove out to the lake to relax. They chose a quiet spot near Twin Oak Ridge, sitting on a small island connected to the shore by a narrow strip of sand. It felt calm, isolated, and safe. There was no reason to believe the day would end in violence. The two spread out a blanket and talked while enjoying the scenery. Lake Berryessa was a popular recreation area, but this spot was far from most visitors. Around 4 p.m., Cecelia noticed a man standing in the trees watching them. At first, they tried to ignore it. People often wandered around the lake. But soon, the man began walking straight toward them. When he stepped into view, both saw something deeply unsettling. He was wearing a black hood that covered his entire head, similar to an execution-style mask. Clip-on sunglasses were attached over the eye holes. On his chest was a bib with a white crossed circle symbol. He held what appeared to be a .45 caliber handgun, aimed at them. The man spoke calmly. He claimed he had escaped from a prison in either Montana or Colorado and needed money and a car to get to Mexico. Bryan immediately offered his wallet and car keys. The man refused. That refusal made it clear this was not a simple robbery. He then pulled out pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline. He ordered Cecelia to tie Bryan's hands and feet. When her knots were loose, he corrected them himself. He then tied Cecelia. Bryan still believed the man would leave once they were restrained. He was wrong. Without warning, the man produced a knife and launched a sudden attack. Bryan was struck first and left unable to resist. The assailant then turned to Cecelia, inflicting multiple wounds that caused serious internal injuries. After the attack, the man walked away calmly, leaving both victims critically injured. He hiked about 500 yards back to Knoxville Road. Before leaving, he went to Bryan's white Volkswagen Carmen Ghia. Using a black felt-tip pen, he drew the crossed circle symbol on the door and wrote dates and locations of previous attacks, ending with September 27th, 69, 6:30 by knife. It was a signature. Nearby, a fisherman and his son heard screams and ran for help. Bryan managed to loosen Cecilia's restraints with his teeth. Rangers arrived first, but it took nearly an hour for an ambulance to reach them. Both were taken to Queen of the Valley Hospital in Napa. Cecelia briefly described the attacker as roughly 6 feet tall and weighing more than 200 pounds. At 7:40 p.m., police received a call from a payphone near their office. A man claimed responsibility for the attack and provided details only the attacker would know. Cecelia slipped into a coma and passed away 2 days later, on September 29, 1969. She was 22 years old. Bryan survived and later became an attorney, though the trauma followed him for life. This attack was linked to a serial offender who called himself the Zodiac. He had already taken multiple lives in earlier incidents. Unlike before, this attack was done face-to-face, with a costume, turning the act into something staged and terrifying. The case inspired many films and documentaries, most notably David Fincher's Zodiac from 2007, which recreated the Lake Berryessa scene in disturbing detail. More than 55 years later, the person responsible was never identified, and the crossed circle symbol remains one of the most chilling images tied to the case. It was August 6, 2000, in West Hills, Los Angeles, California. Nicholas Markowitz, a 15-year-old high school student, left his home around 1 p.m. after a short argument with his parents, Jeff and Susan. Nick was quiet, kind, and very creative. He loved theater and reading. By kindergarten, he had already read more than 300 books and even received an award for it. Nick treated his books with care and once cried when someone damaged one. That afternoon, he was only taking a walk through his neighborhood. He never returned home. Nick lived a calm and supportive life. However, his older half-brother, Benjamin Markowitz, had become involved with a dangerous group in the San Fernando Valley. The group sold illegal substances and was led by Jesse James Hollywood, a 20-year-old who cared deeply about control and reputation. Despite his name, Hollywood came from a wealthy family. He had once been a promising baseball player, but was expelled from school and later turned to illegal dealing. Benjamin owed Hollywood $1,200. When Benjamin tried to cut ties without paying, Hollywood felt insulted. After days of trying to reach him, Hollywood chose another way to apply pressure. That same day, Hollywood was riding in a white van with William Skidmore, 20 years old, and Jesse Ruggie, 21 years old. They saw Nick walking alone. Hollywood decided to take Nick and use him as leverage against Benjamin. They pulled over and forced Nick into the van. A neighbor saw this happen and called 911, even providing the license plate number. Still, the van was gone before the police arrived. Nick's hands were restrained with duct tape. His wallet and pager were taken. He was driven north to Santa Barbara. At first, the plan was to hold him briefly during a local festival, but instead, Nick was moved between several homes. His parents reported him missing right away. Over the next 2 days, Nick was treated in a disturbing but casual way. At Jesse Rugga's house, Nick played video games, attended gatherings, and was given alcohol and illegal substances. He met several people, including Graham Presley, 17 years old, Natasha Adams-Young, and Kelly Carpenter. Nick told them he had been taken by force, but he believed it would end soon. He thought enduring this would protect his brother. When chances to escape were offered, Nick refused, afraid of causing more harm. Natasha Adams-Young told her mother, who was an attorney, that something felt wrong. She did not explain everything. Her mother advised her to stay away from the situation. Later reports showed that 32 people either saw Nick or felt something was wrong. 2 emergency calls were made. No one stopped what followed. Hollywood became afraid of the legal consequences. Taking someone by force is a serious federal crime, and Nick could identify everyone involved. Hollywood decided Nick could not return home. Hollywood contacted Ryan James Hoyt, 21 years old, who also owed him money. Hollywood offered to clear Hoyt's debt and pay an extra $400 if he handled the situation. Hoyt was given a Tech 9 firearm. The location chosen was the Lizard's Mouth Trail in the Santa Ynez Mountains. On the night of August 8th, Graham Presley dug a shallow grave. Just after midnight on August 9th, Nick was told he was going home. Instead, he was taken to the trail. His hands and mouth were covered with duct tape. Hoyt struck Nick from behind and fired 9 times. Nick passed away there alone over a debt that was never his. Nick's body was found on August 12th by hikers. Arrests followed quickly. Everyone involved was charged except Hollywood, who fled. He was captured years later in Brazil and returned to the United States. In 2009, Hollywood was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Nick's case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries in 2001, and later inspired the 2006 film Alpha Dog, which included scenes based on his final days. His mother also shared his story in her memoir, My Stolen Son. Nick was gentle, curious, and full of promise. In his last days, things looked calm on the outside, but inside were fear, silence, and many missed chances. His story remains difficult to hear because it shows how fast reckless choices can pull an innocent person into something they never chose. It was January 25th, 1998, in Port Douglas, Australia. Tom Lonergan, a 33-year-old American, and his wife Eileen, 28 years old, were getting ready for a scuba diving trip on the Great Barrier Reef. The couple was originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They had just finished 2 years of Peace Corps work in Tuvalu and were employed in Fiji. While traveling between assignments, they stopped in Queensland for what was meant to be a short dive trip. It would be their final journey. Tom and Eileen met while attending Louisiana State University, and later married on June 24, 1988, in Jefferson, Texas. Friends described them as close and deeply focused on helping others. Instead of choosing traditional careers, they spent years working in small Pacific nations, living simply and serving local communities. That morning, they boarded a dive boat called the MV Outer Edge, operated by Outer Edge Dive Company. The captain was Jeffrey Ian Nairn, known as Jack. There were 26 passengers on board. The boat traveled about 40 to 60 kilometers offshore to St. Crispin's Reef. The earlier dives that day went smoothly, with nothing unusual reported. At around 3 p.m., the final dive began. Tom and Eileen entered the water with the group, but told an instructor they wanted to explore on their own. They were last seen about 12 meters below the surface. After roughly 40 minutes, divers began returning to the boat. A head count was done, but 2 divers were mistakenly counted twice. The total still came to 26, so no one realized Tom and Eileen were missing. The boat left the area at around 3 p.m., leaving them behind in open water. When Tom and Eileen surfaced, the boat was gone. At first, they may have believed it would return. As time passed, that hope likely faded. They were floating with their diving gear, but had no food, no fresh water, and no reliable way to signal for help. The sun was intense, and dehydration and exhaustion would have started quickly. Strong ocean currents made swimming nearly impossible. The closest pontoon was about 6 kilometers away. No one realized the couple was missing for 2 full days. On January 26th, another dive group noticed weights left on the reef but did not report them. On January 27th, Captain Nairn found a bag on the boat containing the Lonergans' passports and personal items. Only then did the mistake become clear. A large search followed involving police, the Navy, helicopters, and civilian boats. About 8,000 nautical miles were covered, but nothing was found. Over the next several months, personal items began washing ashore. In February, Eileen's wetsuit was found, with damage consistent with coral, not animals. In June, buoyancy jackets, air tanks, and a fin were recovered, all still intact. The most troubling discovery was a diver's slate found near Cooktown. It stated they had been left behind on January 25th at 3 p.m. and asked for rescue. It was dated January 26th at 8 a.m., confirming they survived at least 17 hours. Experts believe dehydration and exhaustion caused confusion and panic. At some point, they removed parts of their diving gear, likely to cool off or due to disorientation. This caused them to lose buoyancy. Without flotation, staying afloat would not have been possible for long, leading to drowning. While sharks were present in the area, no physical evidence supported an animal attack. Diaries later found in their room showed Tom had written about feeling his life was complete, and Eileen had expressed concern about his thoughts. Some suggested the incident was intentional, but their family strongly rejected this. The rescue message, untouched money, and unclaimed insurance supported an accidental explanation. The coroner agreed. In October 1998, the coroner ruled their deaths accidental and linked them to negligence. Captain Nairn was later found not guilty, while the company pleaded guilty, was fined, and eventually shut down. The case led to stricter diving safety rules across Queensland. In 2003, the survival horror film Open Water was released, directly inspired by this case. The movie recreated the fear of being abandoned at sea and became known for its realistic and disturbing death scenes. Tom and Eileen Lonergan were never found. What remains are their belongings, a final message, and a quiet stretch of ocean where they were last seen. It was February 23, 2019, in Beaufort, South Carolina. Mallory Beach, a 19-year-old college student, was preparing for a night out with friends. She had recently graduated from Wade Hampton High School in Walterboro and was working at a clothing store called Retail Therapy while attending college. Mallory lived with her mother, Renee, and dreamed of becoming an interior designer. She loved fashion, often redecorated her room, and cared deeply for animals, regularly taking in strays. That Saturday night, Mallory and her boyfriend, Anthony Cook, planned to attend an oyster roast with friends. None of them knew how the night would end. The group included 6 teenagers, Mallory and Anthony, Anthony's cousin Connor Cook and his girlfriend Miley Altman, and Paul Murdaugh with his girlfriend Morgan Dowdy. Paul came from a powerful local family. For nearly 90 years, the Murdaugh family had controlled legal cases across 5 South Carolina counties. Paul's father, Alex Murdaugh, was a partner at a major law firm, and the family owned multiple properties and boats. They planned to meet at a Murdaugh-owned river property known as Murdaugh Island on the Cecelia River, then take a center console boat to Pawkey Island. Earlier that day, Paul, who was 19 years old and under the legal drinking age, went to a convenience store in Ridgeland. Surveillance footage showed him using his older brother Buster's driver's license to buy alcohol. Around 7 in the evening, the group boarded the boat and traveled to the oyster roast. Over several hours, they all consumed alcohol. Just after midnight, they left to head home. Instead of returning directly, Paul stopped at a dockside bar in Beaufort. Surveillance video showed Paul and Connor entering the bar around 1 in the morning and taking shots. They returned to the boat around 1:15 a.m. By then, Paul's behavior had become unstable and aggressive. Witnesses said he refused to let anyone else drive and acted violently toward his girlfriend, including pushing and striking her. Despite repeated pleas, Paul continued driving at high speeds through dark waters. At approximately 2:17 a.m. on February 24th, the boat struck a piling at the Archers Creek Bridge near Paris Island. Several passengers were thrown into the cold water. Connor suffered a fractured jaw, and Morgan had a severe hand injury. Mallory was thrown from the boat and disappeared. Emergency responders arrived quickly. Connor called 911 and the injured passengers were taken to the hospital. Anthony refused to leave the scene, waiting for news about Mallory. Search teams worked nonstop for 8 days. On March 3, 2019, volunteers found Mallory's body 5 miles downriver near the Broad River. The coroner ruled her death as drowning with blunt force injuries. Hospital tests showed Paul's blood alcohol level was 0.24, triple the legal limit. He falsely claimed Connor was driving, but evidence and witnesses contradicted him. Paul was charged with 3 felony counts, pleaded not guilty, and was released on a $50,000 bond. His trial was set for July 10, 2021. Renee Beach filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Paul, several family members, the boat owner, and Parker's Corporation, the store that sold the alcohol. A financial disclosure hearing threatened to expose Alex Murdaugh's long-running fraud. 3 days before that hearing, on June 7, 2021, Paul and his mother, Maggie, were found shot to death on the family's property. Investigators later proved Alex Murdaugh was responsible. In 2023, he was convicted and sentenced to 2 life terms, plus an additional 40 years for financial crimes. Civil settlements followed. The Beach family received $500,000 from the boat's insurer and $15 million from Parker's Corporation. Renee said it was never about money and planned to donate part of it to an animal shelter in Mallory's name. Mallory's case drew national attention and inspired detailed reenactments and death scene portrayals in documentaries such as Murdaugh Murders, A Southern Scandal on Netflix in 2023, and Murdaugh, Death in the Family on Hulu in 2025, along with the Murdaugh Murders podcast. What began as a late-night boat trip became the first crack in a powerful family's image, exposing years of lies, financial abuse, and loss that can never be undone.